It's football season, and that means it's bug season. Heck, who am I kidding? It's always bug season in Texas. And that's why you need Grandeur Pest Solutions in your corner. They're locally owned and operated. They're trained, they're trustworthy, and they have a proven record as they have been in business for almost 10 years. They provide pest control against ants, bed bugs, bees, roaches, fleas, wasps, mosquitoes, rodents, spiders. If it crawls and you don't like it, they're probably going to take care of it for you. Now, they serve all of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they're locally owned. These two guys have been running this business since 2013, and every year they get bigger and bigger. But you know what they still do? They still have great customer service. In fact, if you get a hold of them, they're usually going to have your quote and your job ready to go within 48 hours. That's pretty good. Now, you can call them for a free estimate at 469-809-1769. You can find them online at Grandeur4, that's the number 4, shore.com. You can also find them on Facebook.
It's time for the old time happy hour. So pick up your step and smile a while. Time to sing along with friends of ours. Wink at your neighbor and lend her some sunshine.
It's time to talk a little baseball. Hello, everybody. Terry Bennett, intern Noe, the pro commissioner. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. How are you? I'm looking forward to the new season. Tomorrow's the start in Tokyo. I think it's the Cubs and Dodgers. So I'm looking forward to it.
What are your thoughts on that? They're doing the second year in a row, maybe even longer than that, but they're doing where they kind of start the season for these two teams, and then they're going to come back to America, and then the season starts. And I think they also will play like a couple of exhibition games in between. I like going to Tokyo and all that. I think that's cool, but I think that they can do it with travel the way it is now, and it's a lot easier. I mean, it's still pain in the butt to fly to Japan, but still it's easier. I think you could start them off in at least the same week of the regular season.
I think because of the distance, travel, and all that, I think it's just a good way for teams to go there, come back, get acclimated to regular season, play a couple exhibition games, and then get right into the season. I'm okay with it. I think it's a start, just like what NFL did, just like what NHL is trying to do with the games in Finland recently with the Stars. NBA, I think they'll be the next at some point. They're going to be trying to do. They've already been trying to expand their game internationally, and you see the influx of talent in baseball, or not baseball, basketball. Like a lot of the best players are European right now. So I think it's just to get that global reach. Now I know Japan has they love baseball. They have a big baseball system out there, but just to bring MLB out there kind of just exposes them a little bit more to not just the Japanese players, but to other stars of MLB.
No, I totally get it. Again, I like it going there. I just think it's kind of funky how they end up doing it. Speaking of Japan and our other show, Bad Movies and a Drink, one day we're going to have to do Mr. Baseball with Tom Selleck, one of my favorite baseball movies, and it's extremely dated, but in a good way. Sometimes you can watch something that's dated and you're like, okay, this is really goofy, but it actually holds up, and it's a really underrated movie. But what we're going to be doing today, before I do that, it's a day early, but tomorrow, intern Noe, the pro commissioner, turns 30.
No one's gonna believe that.
Happy birthday, bro. I don't know something. I've heard something about something don't crack. I'm not gonna say what it is. I'm just saying. No, but happy birthday, buddy. What will your age be tomorrow?
I'll turn 41 tomorrow.
41, big 41.
Yeah,
Catching up. I have slowed down. I've stopped aging at 45 somehow. I don't know why, but it's working for me. So I'm going to do it. But anyway, so happy birthday. So what we're going to be doing tonight, hang on. We know you're doing good because I've already asked. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking Irish whiskey. It's called Egan's, an early birthday present from a friend of mine. Egan's Conviction. Well, I guess you can't see it. But anyway, it's Irish whiskey. It's aged in cognac cask, which is one of my favorite ways to age whiskey. I just like the cognac flavor.
Yeah.
10 years old. It's pretty good. It's 46% alcohol, so a little bit stronger than I'm typically accustomed to with Irish whiskey, but it has like a sweet note on the palate. I'm enjoying it. It's almost like a banana taffy in a way, like
Wow.
that taffy flavor.
Yeah.
I love taffy. That's why
Ah.
as soon as I taste it, I was like, oh yeah, okay.
It's fun when you catch on to an alcohol that hits that flavor profile of something else. I am drinking the refined Taka. It is aged in rot gut. They take it out of the liver of people that have died of alcohol. They then squeeze the liver into a bottle, and it gives me all the special enzymes that'll help me get really, really plastered. No, I still contend if as far as vodka, cheap vodka works as long as it's not, something with a weird aftertaste like that Shiner one that was so sadly terrible. But we're pouring drinks tonight, and we're gonna have a little fun. This is a crossover. If we had, if Ryan was still on staff, we might have had the break of the glass, and then some music, and then oh my God, Texas two seams running into the ring. Because tonight this isn't just an outdrink the coverage show. This is the inaugural Texas two seam show for the 2025 season. You can see the logo right there, and the Texas two seam basically talks baseball, Rangers centric, but like when you're on this show, we will always kind of talk at all. That's just how you and I do things like that. But we're going to do like last year, and Ryan Fox did a wonderful job hosting it until he had left to go up to his new job. He will be joining us some in the summer because he's a huge Ranger fan. But what we're going to do tonight is we're kind of just advertising the Texas two seam while also predicting the baseball season here in 2025. I think just overall talk as we get into this, and we're just going to kind of just start right into it right now. It's really weird because outside of one team, everything else is super competitive. Like this feels like one of those years where we could easily have 3 or 4 division winners that come out of nowhere, or a couple of the wild card teams come out of nowhere. We should all be super, super excited for this year because of that. But you've got the Dodgers sitting there, and this is as close as I remember the 90s and the Yankees. The late 90s and the Yankees, where it didn't matter what everybody else was doing. You just knew they were going to probably end up having to play the Yankees. That's kind of how it feels this year. But I still think there's a lot of interesting baseball that's going to be played separate of them.
Yeah, in both leagues. You see what the Mets did when, they got Juan Soto, and they were able to retain a lot of their good players from a year ago when they made it to, a couple rounds into the playoffs. I think they made it to the NLC. Yeah, they made it to the NLCS, lost in 6 games in a competitive 6 games to the Dodgers. So they just add on Soto to that. It's pretty good. That's a team I'll be looking out for. 1, because I love their uniforms, just beautiful uniforms, and 2, they look like to be a competitive team. Honestly, I know they might not go far, but the Central Division teams in both leagues, I'm really kind of excited for because they play the brand of baseball that I love: strong pitching and timely hitting. I think you called it Whitey ball back in the 80s. Whitey Herzog, rest in peace.
Oh, I thought you meant something else. I thought you were about the 1880s. But no, yeah, Whitey. I mean, nobody really plays it like that anymore. You don't have the bunts. You don't have, you in today's baseball, you can't have a shortstop hitting 210 like Ozzie would. But I mean, Ozzie was just so magical. Man, 2011 destroyed me on 2 fronts because I always kind of liked the Cardinals too. And then, they cheated in that 2011 World Series and they scuffed all the baseballs and, and all that. But no, I loved Whitey Ball, even though they were playing, at that time, oddly, again, this was back when it was 2 divisions. They were in the West, and man, it was them from 1980. Well, you could say 81 because the Astros made the playoffs, but really from 1985 to 1990, San Francisco, St. Louis, and Houston all kind of fought each other. Joe McGrain was a hell of a pitcher for the Cardinals. Him and Mike Scott were always 1 and 2 in the Cy Young race. And, you had Vince Coleman for the Mets, and then he eventually came over. Speaking of Mets, I agree with you 100%. One of the most underrated uniforms Like I love the blue. Of course, you know me, blue. I mean, but I love the blue, but I also love the orange. It's not quite Baltimore orange. It's its own orange. Like it's like University of Texas has their burnt orange that you can't really match. That's kind of how the Mets are. And you got to love Steve Cohen. They're you get Jacob deGrom off your books, you get Max Scherzer off your books, and so let's go screw it. Let's spend the amount that some countries pay in 5 years for all their people for Juan Soto. Now we'll talk about that. I watched a really interesting video on him. I will admit I don't get it. I think he's a wonderful player. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, are we just now at that point where? It's just like with quarterbacks. He's just the market rate because I mean, this is a guy that he hits the ball well, but I mean he's an okay fielder. He's an okay base runner. His locker room stuff can kind of be interesting. I don't know, man. This feels like a massive overpay.
Well, you're being kind to him when you're talking about having okay defense. I would go on to say he's probably not a really good right fielder at
He's
all.
a DH in 3 years. He is a DH in 3 years,
which would be a perfect position for him. But he's 26. He was a stud with the Nationals when they won their World Series. He was a stud with the Padres when they traded for him. And with the Yankees, he was kind of that final piece that was able to get him over the hump and get him back to the World Series. Now, it wasn't enough to win the World Series, but again, he's 26. You're not getting him for his defensive prowess. You get him for what he did last year: 41 home runs, 109 RBIs. I know this stat doesn't mean anything anymore, but he had a 288 batting average, which to me, I still care about batting average. I think it's very important. Had 166 hits. So that's the kind of guy you're getting. And he's, like I said, he's only 26. He can already play well in a big environment like he did last year with the Yankees. He's just going to copy and paste that over with the Mets.
But again, you danced around the question though. Is he worth the money that he got?
To me, yes, because you saw what he did with the Padres. You saw what he did with the Yankees.
Now let's remember he was also part of the Padre team that everybody was like, it's their time. They're the next NL, power. They had beat the Dodgers the year before in the playoffs before the Phillies kind of caught them. Phillies just got hot at the right time. That's baseball type thing. And then the very next year, they don't even make the playoffs. And he was part of that. He started really, really slow. And again, the locker room stuff, he's known for his thing with pitchers. And I like that. I love that kind of, inside the game battle. But also in the locker room, it's not that I don't think he necessarily has a bad reputation, but he doesn't really have a good reputation either. I mean, again, when you're spending that much money, you're asking that guy to be the guy of your locker room.
He seemed excited to come to the Mets, and the Yankees could have matched anything that the Mets would have offered. So just the fact that he wanted to go to the Mets says that he's motivated and he's going to try to improve upon what he did last season. I really think he's worth the money. I think at his age, being at the franchise that has a lot of talent around them, they have a great closer. I think they're a team that's going to be competitive. Now, is it enough to get over the hump and beat the Dodgers right now? Probably not. I think they'll give them a run for their money like they did last season. But having said that, I think this is a step in the right direction for the Mets. They're showing that they're wanting to invest in a winner.
Yeah.
Mets fans are like Jets fans. They've had issues just with consistent winning and management making bad decisions. So this is a good step for the Mets, in my opinion.
I'll say this. I do think it's kind of funny how the year before, they'd done the fire sale. Of course, the Rangers were a benefit of a couple of those guys that got them to the World Series. And everybody was laughing at the Mets. And then last year, they just hard scrabble it and just keep fighting. And they have a magical run. Like, it was enjoyable. Like, the Mets were a fun baseball team to watch last year.
They were. They started off slow, and then they just kind of caught fire. They won a lot of close games. I forgot what their record was last year. I think it was maybe 28-14 or something like that in one-run games. But they just kept winning and winning. And I like the Mets in 2015 when they made it to the World Series, basically based off of their outstanding pitching staff. So, this is a team. If I compare it to the NFL, I'm a Cowboys fan. I always have an AFC team or two.
Yeah.
Chargers, Browns, those are teams I've always liked in the AFC. Mets are kind of like my NL team that I've always just kind of admired from afar, just wanting them to succeed. Because as a kid, I grew up a Braves fan as well. Of course, a Ranger fan, but if I had other teams to watch, just because of TBS and WGN cable networks, I would watch the Braves, I would watch the White Sox, I'd watch the Cubs. So I naturally just gravitated toward those teams. But, as an adult, we have the internet. The Mets, they just seem like a hard luck franchise. They had their ups and downs. They've won a couple of World Series, but this team seems like this is the time where they have a window now, in my opinion. I think they have like a good 5-year window now where they need to do something.
Yeah, that's the great thing about baseball, though, man, is it's you never know with that window. Like I said, I mean, Texas 3 years ago, we were like, man, they're never going to do anything again. 2011 that was it. That's our chance. And then, they win a World Series, and then the Mets, they spend $1 bazillion, then get rid of 90% of that, and then make the playoffs with this scrappy team, and then they spend $1 bazillion again. And maybe that's part of the concern I have with them. And we'll start in the National League here, and we're going to start here in a second. Maybe that's kind of the concern I have with Soto in that locker room is like, is he going to end up ruining something that was kind of special and kind of out of nowhere? Again, nobody thought that the Mets last year were going to do what they did and make the playoffs. We do have to bring up John Stafford's watching the show, and he jokes about, I have the wrong hat on. I should have this hat on. If you don't know, the Major League Baseball had this really cool idea, I guess, where they were going to put both logos superimposed on each other. And by the way, Sports Rehab's the page that we're a part of on Facebook. If you'd like to try to join, we have a stringent policy of how to get on, but you can message us and see. And if you don't know, that says Texas and then has the Texas T. Looks great, actually. It's kind of cool. The problem is if you read that like it is, it's basically Spanish slang for titties, which I don't understand what the issue is. Now, the funnier thing is that the Houston Astro fan base, rivals and all, making fun of that. Theirs, because of the way the H in the Astros actually said asshos. It's one of those things that somebody was not paying attention in marketing, because like the Angels look like it says anals, things like that. I appreciate it, but I do love when you have that kind of stuff still happening when it comes to marketing, because they had to have at least 1,000 people looking at these designs, and not one person said, "Hey, that says Spanish for titties, folks."
Or maybe they knew what they were doing.
See, I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer there was at least 2 people that are like you and I that are working in marketing, and we were like, dude, you see that? Yeah, look at the Astros one. Assholes. Yes. What about the anals? Hell yeah. Yeah, it looks great, dude. Looks great. Let's put that up there.
The Angels anal hat, probably the best thing we talk about the Angels this season.
Boy, you are vicious on them. So it is kind of funny, though. This is why, if this is the first time you do our happy hour, we will get on track with predictions, but this is how we do the show. We just kind of rotate around. It is funny that Steve Cohen spins wildly for the Mets. And they've made a World Series. They've actually been a little bit more consistent than what people realize over the last few years. They've always been right around since going, let's say, 2014. They've been around 500 almost every year. They've made the playoffs 4 times. Of course, that they made the World Series in 2015, and one of the most improbable World Series ever, them versus Kansas City. But he spends all the money, and then it fails, and then he spends it again, and people are like, yeah, look at the Mets. The Angels have spent money, and at times the idea of what they spent looked good. Ohtani, getting him, smart. Mike Trout, smart. At the time, Anthony Rendon, that felt like a smart move. And yet it hasn't worked, and people make fun of them, and it's really weird because they're trying. They just can't get it all together.
Yeah, I think it really started with the Anthony Rendon contract. I mean, you could say it started before then too, but to me, that was kind of the highlight, because this was a guy that tried his hardest, played well, a 30 homer, 100-yard RBI guy for Washington. Wins that amazing World Series against Houston in 2019, and then basically gets his retirement money with the Angels. I feel bad for them in that regard, because this is a guy that clearly had no passion for the game like he played up until that point. They paid for the guy that was a borderline MVP, and what they got was a guy that had no interest in playing. He'd rather just chill.
Okay, so you feel, I mean, the way you're saying that, you're saying he is like he doesn't want to play. Now, he has made comments about, hey, family's more important, this is my job, all that. But I mean, dude, we've got about to be possibly 3-time NBA MVP who has won a title, who famously looks and acts like he does not give a crap about the game of basketball, but he goes out and plays. I don't think Rendon's like purposely dogging it. I think he's just hurt and he's just running bad luck. But because of things that he said, which it's really weird. This is that weird thing how we treat sports, is because he says, oh, this is just a job, people get mad. Well, I mean, it is just a job. Yeah, it's, as kids, we loved playing the sport. Yeah, I would love to have played pro baseball. That'd have been fun. But at the end of the day, that's still a tenuous, grinding, you're playing 5 out of 6 days, all that kind of stuff. I don't think it's necessarily bad for him to say, hey, this is just a job for me.
Oh, I completely agree with you. I think family first. I think that's a good thing. But the problem is he took all that money knowing he was needing to be the superstar for the next few years. And he's going to get his money no matter what. So I think the drive, the motivation to play at an MVP caliber just went away.
See, I just think he's just been hurt. I just think he unfortunately has gotten hit with the injury bug. And it's kind of crazy. I just realized we're sitting there talking about 2 former Nationals who led them to a World Series. That World Series will be the forgotten World Series of the 10-year run. There's the thing that makes it memorable is that they beat a dynasty in the making, or an almost dynasty. I don't know what you'd call the Astros. I think they were a dynasty, but they knocked them off, and so
why are you saying we're a dynasty? Are you thinking it's over now?
Yeah, I think it's over now. I think that people will never. Again, we'll have a show one day about how the Ranger fan base hates John Daniels. It's one of the weirdest things ever. This dude basically built 3 World Series teams for a franchise that had never even had more than 1 playoff win. Yeah. And yet people hate him because they bought into this perception of Nolan Ryan, because Nolan Ryan is such a Texas legend. But John Daniels said this in 2016. He said, look, we're not the Yankees. We're not the Red Sox. We don't have that spending. So what we do as a real world team is you get your prospects, you build, and you hope that group works. You ride them as long as you can. You make trades that you're going to hate to make, but you're trying to extend that run as long as you can. And eventually, because you don't have the money, you're going to it's going to run its course, and then you start over. And Houston's right. Houston is right at that era where they could still I could still see them winning a World Series. I could still see them winning the division. I can still see them winning 97, 98, 100 games. But that depth is gone. So I can also see them only winning 70 games and running through some injuries and things like that. So, yeah, I do think we're at least at the sunset of the division. But we'll get that. We'll talk about AL West, of course. We'll talk at the end of the show. We're going to go through it. We're going to start with the NL. But first, I want to talk about the L Dogs combo of the month, and that is the OWT dog. You cannot get more Texas than this one, brother. It's all beef dog topped with homemade chili, mustard, cheese, and Fritos. That's the defining thing right there. You know me, even before we ever heard of L Dogs, I put chips on my hot dogs. I put Fritos or Ruffles when I do chili cheese dogs. I even put chips on my regular sandwiches, but especially on those.
You and me both.
Yeah. Yep, and you and I, it's cool. So next weekend, we're going to go up to where he's going to be serving at the Frisco Farmers Market at 9215 John W. Elliott Drive in Frisco. And by the way, that's every 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. You and I are going to go up there, and we're going to have some dogs. And you, because of Lent, you're going to try the vegan dog, which I'm very interested to see because it looks good. I'm not going to say it sounds good because when you describe a vegan product, it just doesn't, because you're using words like potato tying starch and rice based. But the picture, it actually looks like a pretty darn good looking hot dog.
Yeah, I can't wait to try it. I've only tried one in my lifetime. I had the Beyond Burger, not Beyond Burger, Beyond Sausage. That was actually okay, but now I don't really care for it. So the hot dog one I've had was actually in Vegas one time. I was just out there, and it was during Lent, and there was one available, so I tried it. I didn't really care for it, but I'm pretty sure Ella Dog's gonna impress me.
Didn't we back in the day when they first came out? Didn't we try the Beyond Burger Whoppers? I think we did, didn't we?
The Impossible Whoppers, yeah, and I actually did like those. Those were actually pretty good.
You needed to hide it in the condiments. You needed to hide it with the mustard and the mayonnaise. I think if that's the only sandwich I've ever had mustard, mayonnaise, and ketchup. And it's funny you say that about you tried the Beyond Sausage and you liked it at first. That was my issue because I have done this with you before, the Lent thing, and it's really tough. And the toughest thing is you try something once and you think you like it. Like I remember Studio Wife got us the fake shrimp from a place, and the first time I was like, okay, that's passable. And then the next time she got it, it was like, okay, this tastes like rubber.
Yeah.
It's like you can fool your mind sometimes, but that second time, it doesn't. But anyway, the OWT dog is the combo of the month, $3 off. So when you go there, just mention, outdrink the coverage, and you would like the OWT dog combo, which is the hot dog, a drink, and a bag of chips. And so we'll be talking more about them. But let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to start. Let's go ahead and start. Let me see here. We're going to start National League. And here is our thing. Oh, look at that graphics. I love it. You can tell you and I love logos. All right, so what we're going to be doing here is we're just going to go down and these are our picks. And for the most part, you and I agree on every playoff team. I just realized that except for the Central. But we agree on the East. The two teams, we have different division winners, but we agree both of them make the playoffs. We both have LA in the playoffs. We both have the Phillies and the Diamondbacks as wild cards. Again, me and you just have the East switched. But let's start in that Central because, like you said, I don't really know if the Central will be anything in the playoffs, but I do think the Central race will be fun in the National League.
I really think so too. There's a lot to like about the NL Central. I guess I can start with probably with the Cardinals. Just work my way up. So the Cardinals, they had probably the worst offseason in baseball. They did absolutely nothing, and the one goal they had was to trade Nolan Arenado, and they didn't accomplish that. Having said that, they still have some semblance of a good team. So last year they won 83 games. I think they'll still be competitive. But I think they'll be fourth or fifth this season. I really think like someone like the Reds might overtake them, get like the third spot. Ellie De La Cruz, a stolen base machine. He's so good. They did trade India to the Royals, so that might not help the Reds this season, but I think that's a team that's eventually going to be on the rise. My actual favorite team just to watch this and be one because I love their uniforms, Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah.
I love their, so to me, they remind me of the Tigers in the AL because they have such great starting pitching. Their offense might not be there in total. They have some players, but they're not probably the most offensively fluent. But Paul Skeens, he's so fun to watch. Jared Jones, he's a number two. It could be an ace on any other team. And they got Mitch Keller as your third pitcher. I mean, that's just amazing to have. So, and they have another guy that's going to probably be a rookie this season coming in, Bubba. I forgot his last name, but the Pittsburgh's going to have a really underrated starting five, and I think that pitching is really going to carry them. They could be a third place finisher, or they could, be a sneaky favorite to win the Central. But the reason why I put the Cubs over the Brewers is basically due to the Cubs having a better offseason. Milwaukee lost Adames to the 49ers, the San Francisco Giants. He's a great shortstop, 29 years old. And the Cubs added Astros right fielder Kyle Tucker, which to me, that's the difference in who's going to win the Central this season.
Well, you talk about Paul Skeens. At what point, if you're the Pirates, are you offering him $500 million to guarantee lock him up? And I know they have all the options on him and all that, but I really think they need to be very proactive with him, because he's either going to be your franchise or it's going to be a footnote that, oh, yeah, he started with the Pirates. I forgot about that after he went to the Yankees and had 10 great years or whatever.
Yeah. I really, this whole thing is really tough. I mean, I think that's why I like the Central divisions in both leagues, because it's just so hard to figure out who's going to really win it. In the NL, it's really a 2-team race.
Yeah.
You picked one, I picked the other. Milwaukee, I remember last season their executive of the year. I think it was the first time Milwaukee has ever had an executive of the year.
Well, I thought Doug Melvin won it one year as GM. Maybe they're separating that as executive and GM.
Yeah, well, Matt Arnold, I mean, after losing Craig Counsell to the Cubs. Yeah. And, I came on this show last year talking to you and Ryan about how much I didn't like Counsell leaving the Brewers, going to the Cubs and getting all that money and all that expectation. I don't know why I didn't like it. I just didn't like it. And I was kind of just rooting for the Brewers more, and they ended up having like a Cinderella run to winning the division with, again, strong pitching. A really good season from Christian Yelich until he got hurt.
Yeah, he had a bounce back year. I mean, I remember us talking about him last spring, like, he's going to be a guy that we thought might get traded or even just outright released, and then he had a bounce back year.
Yeah, and hopefully he continues that going forward, because Milwaukee's going to need him, and they're going to need Brandon Woodruff and company is going to have to still step up pitching. They still have talent. I think they're going to be very competitive. I think they'll be, they're definitely going to win over 82 games. They'll be a winning team this season. But I just think the Cubs did enough in the offseason, and Milwaukee lost enough in the offseason to swing it back to Chicago.
Well, this feels like one of those divisions, as I said right when we began, one of those divisions where Pirates catch hot. The Reds. Even the Cardinals. Look, everybody is saying the Cardinals had a bad offseason. They did, because they didn't make any additions. And as you said, they had one guy they were trying to trade to kind of reboot, and they weren't able to trade him. But, I mean, this was a team last year that was 83-79, and they have everybody back. Now, again, that could also be part of the problem, is they have everybody back. But, you look at the Reds. I mean, they were just under 500. They played above 500 for most of the year. The Pirates have this has become their thing. They kind of remind me a lot of the Rangers of the 80s. They start hot, and then they kind of fade as the depth becomes an issue. But, I mean, I have the Brewers, you have the Cubs, but I don't feel 100% safe with either one of those picks.
Oh, they might win as many playoff games this season as the Florida Marlins. So I don't feel confident whoever comes out of the Central is going to make a deep postseason run. But we have to pick a winner. So,
all right. So you have the Cubs. I have the Brewers. I think it's going to be it's going to be competitive like the AL Central, but with the difference is there's not one terrible team in the Central. In fact, that's the thing that makes it interesting is, again, you could make a case for every team in that division if things go their right way, if, lack of injuries, a key trade, all that. Legitimately, I think any team in the Central could possibly win that division. I have it the Brewers. I have the Cubs. In saying that, though, nobody else, there's no wild cards in this team. Whoever wins the division, that's the only playoff team from the Central for me.
That is something you and I can agree on.
All right, let's go over now to the MLB National League East, another one that we have differences on, though this one, our difference is just simply where they're at. You have the Mets winning the division. I have the Astros. I have the Braves winning, though Philly, we both have them making the playoffs. Philly feels like the team that could do what they did a couple years ago and kind of slide in past either one of those teams if, the Braves or blah, 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 the Mets have a slow start. And also, you can't really trust the Mets still.
Because they're the Mets, that was the thing I was going to say earlier. Because they're the Mets, you can't trust them. I'm just going based off of, just excited for the season to start. So I'm just going to go pick the team that everybody thinks is going to make some noise. But, having said that, I could definitely see the Eagles, the Phillies, or the Braves winning the division. Phillies, because a lot of their core players, they've been there like for the last 5-6 years. They went from the late 20s down their early 30s. Because of advancements in medicine, improved health, sort of load management going on in baseball now, players are playing longer than ever. So all their core players are in their early 30s. They're going to still be good. They're going to still be elite. So I'm not worried about that. Bryce Harper's only 32. He's been in the league forever, but still young. I would say the Braves, when they lost Max Fried, is a step back. But you have to remember Spencer Strider, he was out last season, and he'll be back, and he's an ace pitcher with Chris Sale. Ronald Acuna, he's back. And I really think them two having a healthy season could push the Braves to winning the East. You and I both agree they're going to be in the playoffs. They're just too talented top to bottom to not be in the playoffs.
Well, and Atlanta and Texas were the two teams that had made the playoffs the year before that if anything could go wrong, it went wrong for them last year. Injuries for both sides. In Atlanta, like you're saying, Acuna now, 2 out of 3 years, he's basically missed the whole year pretty early. If they can stay healthy, I think they're the deepest team outside of the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks. And we'll talk about the Diamondbacks in a minute. I think Atlanta, if there's a team that can beat the Dodgers in the NL, it's Atlanta. Because Atlanta can match them in a playoff rotation of 4. Atlanta's the one team in the National League that can match them and have the bats behind that as well.
Now I remember why I picked the Mets. And it has to do with Ronald Acuna's younger brother.
Yeah.
Luis Angel. Former Ranger who was part of a trade to get Jacob deGrom, if I'm not mistaken, or Max Scherzer, one or the other. But anyway, it was a trade with to the Mets, and he's probably going to play second base this season. So I was really excited to hear about that because I've heard so many good things about him, especially from the winter leagues, spring training. But yeah, he was like a big reason, and he might be in contention for NL Rookie of the Year. All things play out the way I think it's going to play out.
Well, and he was one of those that when the Rangers made that move, it was like we need to make that move, but God, that really hurts to make that move. Like you knew he was maybe not as good as his brother, but you knew he was going to be really, really special. Mario Scott said that the Cardinals were disappointing last year. This is the thing about them, man. They have gotten so good at being consistently good that when they don't make the playoffs for a couple years, it's weird. I mean, you look since 2010, or we'll go 2009, because they made the playoffs in 2009. They missed it in 2010. They cheated the Rangers in that World Series in 2011. That's going to be investigated. Trump's going to take care of that for us. We're going to make the Rangers great again. They then lost in the NLCS, lost in the World Series, lost in the NLCS, lost in the NLDS, then didn't make the playoffs for 3 years, and then made the playoffs for 4 years in a row, and now haven't made it playoffs in 2 years. So it's kind of like they're on that cycle where they might miss the playoffs again, but I don't really think the Cardinals are ever going to be that far away from it as they've been so close. And we can even, go even further back when you go to, what was that, 2006? They won the World Series. 2004, they lost the World Series. We all just call that the Boston Red Sox Yankees season. But man, the Cardinals have been so consistent that even when they finish with a 500 record and don't make the playoffs, they're disappointing.
And if I'm not mistaken, part of the reason why the Cardinals weren't able to catch up with the Brewers and the Cubs was because Paul Goldschmidt kind of had a down year for his lofty standards. And a lot of people, and Yankees especially, they're expecting him to have a bounce back for sure since they just acquired him. But I think that was another part of the reason why the Cardinals weren't as good last season. But they still had a winning program.
Yeah, and again, it's not like they got bad. It's just everybody around them got better.
That is a good point. Like the Pirates stole some victories. The Cubs got better. Yeah, that does happen. That's why the Dodgers only won 98 games. I know there's a lot of people thinking that they're gonna shock the world and win 120 this season just because of all the starting and relief pitching they added in the offseason. But if other teams get better as well, those teams are going to vulture some wins.
Yeah.
So even if the Dodgers win 95 or 93 games, I still think they're a better team this year than they were last year.
No, I totally agree with you. All right, let's go to the West, and we both have the same team winning. It's the Super Dodgers. But I'm going to say this. I'm not guaranteeing a 1993 repeat, but the Arizona Diamondbacks in any other division in baseball outside of the NL West in the AL East, I think they would be the favorite. The Diamondbacks have built a very deep, very, very good squad, and they're going to finish second, in my opinion, but they might end up with 97 to 98 wins.
1993. Are you talking about the Giants
And Braves.
Braves? That was, again, we've talked about this on many shows. That was the first year I watched. That was when I became in love with Barry Bonds and like how great he was, and Matt Williams in that 93 Giants team. Will Clark, Bill Swift, like there's a lot of Burkett, great pitcher. So that was, for those that don't know, 93 Giants were the team that won, I think, the most games for a team that didn't make the playoffs.
Yep, and they're the only team in the divisional era to win 100 games and not win their division. I think
it was the last year before they started having a wild card, because the very next year was a strike.
Yeah, and then in 94 or 95 they started, and this was kind of the season that pointed that this is the wild card thing had been talked about for a while, but this was kind of what pushed it over. The Giants, if I remember correctly, they won 102 games and the Braves won 103, or the Braves won 104 and they won 103. I can't remember. It was one game, and it all came down to the last day of the season. They were tied. The Giants had they got super hot real late. Like the Braves had like a 6 or 7 game lead over them, and then they just closed out the last like 20 games with like a 17 out of 20 or something like that. But they lose to the Dodgers on the last game. The Braves won, and if both teams would have won, we'd have had the 100 game 163, which everybody was wanting. But the Giants they just ran out of steam.
Yeah, they got blown out by the Dodgers. I remember Matt Williams in a post-game interview. He was very not happy with that situation. He was very mad that a division rival in the Dodgers just obliterated them in game 162 to prevent them from even making the playoffs. And, that just gave more justification to expand that playoff format, because, way back when, baseball has been around for over 150 years. You don't want that many teams. But now you get, fast forward to 92, 93, you have almost 30 teams. So there was a need to expand the playoff system. And I'm fine with that.
Oh, yeah. Me too.
You're playing so many games in the regular season just for only 4 teams to make the playoffs. Because back then it was 2 divisions per league. The division winner played in a best of 5. And so, yeah, there was definitely a need to expand that. And I definitely I'm okay with the current format too.
Let's be honest. As Ranger fans, without the format, they don't make the playoffs. The World Series team doesn't even make the playoffs with the old format. And I'm like you. I think it's such a long season. I don't like the whole one game thing. That's weird in baseball for me. I do wish they would maybe go best of 3. I think it should be best of 3, best of 5, best of 7. So best of 3 for the wild cards, best of 7 for the division, or best of 5 for the division, best of 7 for the championship series, and best of 7 for the World Series.
I want to say they just started doing that this past
season. They did. As I was saying that, I think they did. So all that points to the AL or the NL West, where you're going to have, I think, 3 really good teams.
1 average and 1 trash. Yeah.
Who's the trash?
Colorado.
Yeah, we'll talk about them in a minute. Yeah, Giants in any other division probably fights for a playoff spot all year, and they still could. I mean, they're still they're you know, you do all that. I love all reading predictions, but my favorites are the worst case, best case scenario articles when you're starting a season. And the Giants are one of those that, man, if everything breaks right, they can still be competitive. But man, as long as the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks stay healthy, the issue is going to be you're not going to be able to have the 1 or 2 bad weeks that baseball teams will have. You can't lose 6 out of 8 in that division, because if you lose 6 out of 8 in that division at the wrong time, all of a sudden the 2 teams ahead of you by 2 and 3 games are now ahead of you by 7 or 8 and 7 games, and then you know how tough that can be. I don't know if the Giants can be consistent enough.
Yeah, things do have to break right for the Giants. I definitely agree with you. Getting a 42-year-old Justin Verlander, you're going to need him to get to 30 starts. You're going to need shortstop Willie Adames to be 30 plus homers, 100 RBIs. You need Max Chapman to at third base to just have a career year. Like, there's a lot of things that have to fall in place. Kind of like with I think the 2021 Giants that won 106-7 games with Gabe Kapler at manager. They had a great season, but they were winning a lot of close games.
Yeah, and weird games.
There was no real superstar in that lineup. I think Brandon Belt was one of their best. Like, it was just a weird season where things just fell right. You were really passionate about NL West baseball back then. I remember you tell me you'd stay up sometimes and just watch that. So you were really following it. And then what happened the next season? They went 80 games or 81 games. So they just had an outlier in 21, and then the rest of the years they were just kind of went back to what they really are, a 500 team.
Yeah, and the significant thing about the Giants this year is future Hall of Famer, former Giant catcher Buster Posey is running the organization. They bring in Willie Adams, really good shortstop. Can he stay healthy? They bring in, as you said, Justin Verlander. Can he stay healthy? Will Logan Webb stay healthy? Not that he's been hurt, but how many times? I mean, this is one of the tells as old as baseball. When a guy has an amazing year pitching, for some reason, it always seems like the next year an injury will happen. And it'll be a bad injury. And so, can he stay healthy? Young Ho Lee, who was, he was the guy that they brought in last year, who was supposed to be real big, and he was injured for almost the whole season. And saying that, they still finished 80 and 82. I kind of feel like that's about where they're going to end up this year. They're going to end up around 500. Best case scenario is they get the third wild card. I do not see in any world they can leapfrog both the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks. I'm telling you, man, the Diamondbacks, this was that World Series was weird. And it was weird because nobody, people had said, the Rangers have if DeGrom can stay healthy, which he couldn't, if Max Scherzer can stay healthy, which he couldn't for most of the year, if they have all that, then the Rangers could make the playoffs. And of course, they go on a magical run. They go 14-0 on the road. But the team that they beat in the World Series, I don't think people realize, because they were probably a year early. I don't think people realize just how deep and how good the Arizona Diamondbacks are.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Just one more thing to say about the Giants, that another thing that could propel them is if Robbie Ray goes back to what he was in 2021.
Yes, exactly. Good point.
Where he was a Cy Young Award winner. He's still in that starting rotation, so that'll be big for them. But switching over to the Diamondbacks, that 2023 World Series. Diamondbacks had no business being there, but they were there. They were young. They were very happy, especially after that Game 2 where they just destroyed Texas in Arlington. I really thought that the Diamondbacks might have actually, disappoint you and me yet again. But what ended up happening was, the Rangers came back and took care of business in Arizona. But this Arizona, getting Corbin Burns,
yes,
from the Orioles, who was a standout with the Brewers before that. Oh, and you still have Zach Gallen, you have Merrill Kelly, Brandon Pfaadt. Like, this is a really good starting rotation. They have a pretty solid bullpen. And they got Josh Naylor. They lost Christian Walker to the Astros, but I don't really think that's too big. Like Naylor is younger, so he'll be there longer, and I think he still has a good upside. But I mean, yeah, Gurriel, Suarez, it's Marte, one of the best second basemen in baseball right now.
So Marte, I mean, he had it'll get lost because they lost how magical his playoffs were in 2023. And then he responded last year for the season with 36 home runs. I think he batted 290. I mean, he's now legitimately in the MVP race in the major league or in the National League. And I'm like you, though. This all rests on, does Burns continue what he does, or does he take a step back? If he takes a step back, well, then you got to worry. They need Corbin Carroll to get back into form. He was the rookie of the year in 2023. He had a great playoffs. And then last year, he was kind of hurt and he was kind of struggling at times. But if he gets back into it, and they've got, outside of Berman, they have such a really good, solid pitching rotation with Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly. I really do feel like this is one of those teams that if they get into the playoffs, nobody's going to want to play them.
Yeah, they're very solid top to bottom. Not many weaknesses. I agree. There's not 5 teams I could name that could realistically beat the Diamondbacks in a best of 7.
All right, now we will not say who we think is going to make the playoffs yet. I mean, who's going to make the how the playoffs will go. We'll do that when we flip over. We're about to do the AFC first. I mean AFC AL first. But before we do that, I gotta remember. Hang on. I gotta remember which one this is. Hang on. Nope. Nope. Hang on. I want this turned off. Well, that's crazy. Where did he? Oh, don't tell me I got rid of it.
What in the outdrank the coverage is going on here?
Is this it? One of them isn't playing. Nope, that's not it. I guess I did. Oh well.
You might have replaced that with the birthday one.
No, I didn't. Anyway, it's the Suck What? Sucky teams that will suck in 2025. Suck What, where cowfish culture meets Cajun style. Go to www.suckwhat.com. Get all your Cajun apparel and needs. These are the 3 teams that are going to absolutely suck. Now, somebody else will fall down. I think you and I were kind of talking about the Angels. Maybe I still think the Angels, if they're healthy, are better than what people think. And people got to remember Ron Washington. He can do things. But these 3 teams, the Colorado Rockies, the Chicago White Sox, because we know the Chicago White Sox, and the Miami Marlins, all 3, I don't think any of these teams gets over 65 wins.
Yeah, and that's on the upside. I really think Chicago, who set the record last season with only winning 41 games, if they get 10 more wins this season, I would consider it a success, but it would it'll still only be 51 wins, so it'll still be a terrible season. Colorado, they have a great shortstop, Tovar, and I think that's about it. Miami, they have a great pitcher and Sandy Alcantara, and that's about it. He'll be trade bait by midseason. So yeah, those are my positives for those 3 teams.
I know everybody talks about Tampa Bay. And especially now because of the stadium situation, they've just announced now that, hey, we're not even trying to build a stadium now. We've got to fix what we have. Everybody's talked about them moving. I think Miami's very dangerous in that. And it is kind of disconcerting that you've got the Rockies and the Marlins, 2 teams that came in together, and they've both have had some success. Both have been to a World Series. Of course, Miami oddly has won 2. Colorado went and lost, but they've at least been. But it is disconcerting that both of those teams are now back to where they are. But I don't think Colorado's going anywhere. But I legitimately feel like Miami, if things don't turn around here, I think people will start talking about why do we have a team there? Because they're 2 World Series teams. We're both kind of spent 4. They were one-year wonders. And it wasn't like they were, having 4 million people come and watch them at that point either. I feel like Miami might not be a Miami franchise within 10 years.
I mean, it's very possible. They just can't get people to come out there unless they're winning, and even when they're winning, they're still not packing the stadium. So yeah, it's just probably not a base. It's really not a sports town, to be honest with you. Like you see a lot of Heat games, they're not sold out, even though they have a competitive team. Dolphins, it's more of an attraction. It's almost like LA. It's just more of an attraction. Like you're
Yeah.
just going to be seen, but like it's just unless they're winning consistently, you're not going to sell out, man. It's just not a place for sports.
But here's the thing about this one is you look at two of the three. The Sox and the Marlins a few years ago, both of them seemed like they were young. You know, the Marlins made the playoffs out of nowhere. And then the very next year basically just got rid of that whole team. In fact, I can't think of it.
Including that female executive, Kim Ang.
No, she left on her own. She was.
I think there were some issues, though.
Yeah, I think she saw that the owners weren't committed to winning. The manager for them then, I can't think of his name. He's basically the next Ranger manager. The Rangers hired him. He's now working as a special assistant, but they've basically all but said this is the guy that replaces Bruce Bochy. I have a really funny feeling that this might be Bruce Bochy's last year, especially if they win a world. If the Rangers go and win a World Series, I think he's out. I think he's like, I've done everything. You have now become, he's already in the top 5, in my opinion, talk of greatest manager of all time. You win 2 World Series with the Rangers after winning 3 World Series with the Giants. You have solidified yourself in that Casey Stengel, John McGraw, Billy Martin, whatever, however that's going to, you want to talk about a discussion that would never end. And that's if we ever did a top 5 managers of all time in baseball. Because you want to bring up somebody like Connie Mack, but then you look at Connie Mack actually really, outside of certain years, he actually was pretty crappy. But there's just so many of them. And then
Bochy has a losing record still. He's still 14 games under 500. He has a winning record with the Rangers, though. That's good.
Well, and I think it was right after he won last year. They won one game and he was at 500. And then the Rangers struggled last year, even though they did close out the season stronger than what people thought. But then the Sox, man, dude, the Sox 3 years ago, you and I remember the conversations we were having, just talking like, dude, the Sox are about to be the next, holy crap, they're going to make 3 World Series in 7 years teams. And dude, it fell apart, and it fell apart so quick.
So quick. I remember being a big fan of Tim Anderson during that time. And I've always loved the Sox. Again, another team. I love their uniforms. And especially when as a kid, you learned about, the East Coast, West Coast rap gangs. Yep. And like in the West Coast, the colors you wear are black or white. So that's why like teams like the Raiders were being rocked out in rap culture. And the White Sox too.
It was NWA. NWA was the one, you had the Crips, and it was always funny seeing like Texas Ranger hats out in LA because that was a real big look because, again, they were straight blue. But then NWA, Ice Cube would always wear his Raiders hat. And then not Chuck D, boy, that's Dr. Dre, he would rock the Sox. And the Sox made a uniform change. So they had a really cool look in the 80s, but it wasn't black and white. It was blue, red, gray. It was a cool look. And when they wear those uniforms now, it's really cool. But in 91, I think it was, or 90, they changed to the black and white and just the simple socks across the helmet, the hat, and it is such a good look. It's simple, and in baseball, 90% of the time, simple works best.
Yeah, simple works best. Hey, just like with the search engines, I love Google because it's simple, and you can copy and paste that to anything, really, especially with marketing and designs. I love the logo. It looks so great. Uniforms look so clean. So yeah, I agree with you.
All right, now let's go over to the American League. And these are our teams. These are who we have winning the division. Here are our wild card. Now, again, you and I differ, but we don't a lot, but we do as far as one team in the wild card. I will say this. The AL East is the hardest to pick because of how deep it is. You know what's crazy, dude? We just talked NL West, and we didn't even bring up the Padres, and yet they're still ridiculously talented.
Oh yeah,
They
yeah.
still, I mean, again, if the Dodgers or Diamondback falter, the Padres could easily slide in there and be a playoff team. And in fact, I think they'll win 86, 87 games this year. I just don't think they have the depth now. They're kind of in between a fire sale and keeping the team. Them and Toronto are kind of in the same area right now. And we'll talk about Toronto here in a second, because let's start with the AL East. This is the best division, top to bottom, in the league, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more, because the fifth place team in this division, whether it be Toronto or whether it be Tampa, those are my assumptions. I still think those are teams that could be close to 500.
Yeah.
That's how good this division is. They're gonna beat each other up. It's like when the SEC was actually good, and they were just beating each other up. And in college football, or right now in college basketball, SEC is killing it right now. Have you filled out your bracket, sir?
Heck no. I don't. Man, college basketball is the sport that I loved all sports. And you and I have talked about this. As you get older, I just think eventually you just kind of start going, okay, I can't follow them all anymore. And so you pick and choose. In college basketball, I will watch, I'll probably watch the playing game because it's Texas and Xavier. Man, them and Xavier always end up playing against each other in the NCAA. This is the fourth time they've played each other. I'll watch it, and I'll watch the first couple days because it's always exciting. You've got 42 games going on, a new game starting every 90 minutes. But honestly, man, we were talking about this in NBA stuff. Basketball, all sports have gotten really analytical and weird. Basketball is kind of just, I don't want to say unwatchable, but I just don't enjoy the game right now.
I agree. I don't enjoy it as much either, but I got to fill the bracket out. And I had to pick St. John's this year, man. I really think they're going to do it.
Take a hooker, Patino.
That's the main reason. Like, they had such a great season. I think they're a 2 seed. I'm on the bandwagon for this.
Dude, I've told you this before, but I grew up with the Big East in the 80s. St. John's with Lou Carnesecca, Raleigh Massimino at Villanova, John Thompson at Georgetown, Rick Pitino was there with Providence and all that. But man, like I always joked that I legitimately thought Georgetown was a historically black college because you never saw a white dude on the team. And I can still remember the first time I went to Georgetown and was like, this is a rich white private school. What in the hell's going on here? But man, I love the Big East. I will always have a song. Oh, and speaking of baseball show, but we do want to acknowledge the late great John Feinstein, who passed away, who wrote. He is the guy that got me into my favorite sports book or show or behind the scenes. Following a team for a year, following a league for a year, things like that. And John Feinstein was a big writer on the Big East and things like that. So, yeah. But I just don't watch basketball anymore. But anyway, let's go to baseball. All right, so AL East.
So I was going to say AL East, I think it might be Toronto. So the thing is, Toronto is the biggest wild card to me. Bo Bichette cut his hair. So that means he's going to play better, apparently. It's the reverse Samson effect.
Travis Janzowski says, sir, we can have long hair and play well.
Sure.
That's the cast with a big, beautiful, long, flowing lock.
I know.
Been MVP of the World Series. No,
Vlad, him and Bichette are free agents at the end of the season. This is a part of the reason why I was saying they're such a wild card to me. Not literally, but like figuratively, just a team that can either be really, really good or really, really bad. And come mid-season, if they are not competing at all, because that AL East, like you said, is going to be super crazy and competitive, I could see a fire sale.
Oh yeah, I think. I mean, even dude, it might even be a situation. Now, to be fair, they were in on the Juan Soto talks, but You said it
Hey,
best.
you know what? We didn't even mention him that much, but Roki Sasaki, the guy from Japan that came over to the Dodgers, Toronto for like a hot second, they were the favorite to get
Yeah,
him.
they were the favorite, supposedly. Now, I agree with you about Guerrero Jr. and Bichette. Both of them have kind of leveled off. Um, if they are engaged all year, and if they are playing for their next contract, Toronto can be scary. But they also don't have a lot of depth behind that. And
They have a lot. Again, they have a lot of stars. Anthony Santander, they got from the Orioles, is playing DH this season. He's a 40 home run guy. Got from the Orioles. I can't believe the Orioles got rid of him, but he's a great player. And they got Max Scherzer.
and who's been throwing well. Like he's been hitting 98 all spring. And he was the one, like, again, you can't keep everybody, and you've got a lot of younger pitching coming up. But he was the one I was like, man, I really wish Texas would have just done one more year with him, because when he pitched in Texas, he pitched well. Again, though, the issue is injuries with him, but he has looked good. I think at the end of the day, though, it's about depth. That's the thing that's going to hurt them when compared to the other teams in the AL East. I want to say this. Now, you see our thing, and we both have the Orioles. I kind of feel like the Orioles and the Detroit Lions are parallel in different sports. Both of them become the hot name, and both of them have had great regular seasons the last 2 years, and then both of them have fallen short in the playoffs. Now, to be fair, the Lions have at least advanced. They made the NFC Championship game 2 years ago, a year before. The Orioles, dude, they've been swept in back-to-back playoffs. And it kind of feels like all of a sudden this really young team, they're kind of at a crossroads here, because if they don't make the playoffs, or if they do make the playoffs and then don't get out of the first round, whatever that may be, whether it's the wild card round or the division round, you kind of start going, okay, is this a talented but flawed team?
Yeah, and again, you have to consider: is it a front office thing? Is it a manager thing? Is it a situation where they don't have enough veteran leaders in the clubhouse to motivate that young talent they have? Because we all know they have talent. Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, cornerstone players for that
Jordan
team for years.
Westberg, Colton Cowser, Jackson Holiday. This team is absolutely loaded. But let's also, again, going back to, let's not forget, they looked for the first half of the year like the Baltimore Orioles that we thought they were going to be. And then in the second half, they kind of collapsed. They collapsed.
Yeah, they just kind of backed into the playoffs. I agree with you. They were still competitive. They almost won I think they were leading the division for a while, but then they lost.
They basically led it all till August, and then the Yankees caught them.
Yeah, and that was kind of a reason why Aaron Judge was getting more of the MVP talk, because him and Soto were kind of just pulling the Yankees out and past the Orioles. I don't know. I don't know if they have a hangover from what happened in 2023 versus the Rangers in the postseason, but this Oriole team, they need to. It looks like they'll be able to get out of the regular season and into the playoffs. That's the regular season is not the issue. It's the postseason. Like, just concentrate. I think this is where they need strong veteran leadership in order to get out of the wild card round or get out of the divisional round.
Yeah, that's where I felt that the Orioles could use a Max Scherzer type. Someone that can be, again, if he's healthy, but someone that can be that veteran that takes the ball every 5 days and settles you down. If you've lost, 2 out of 3, he'll take care of it for you. And again, this team is still ridiculously talented, ridiculously young.
If the Orioles don't do it this year, the easiest thing they'll do is fire Brandon Hyde.
You fire the manager first. I don't like that they gave up on Burns. Not gave up, but they didn't. I'm worried that they're not going to they're not going to spend to supplement this team. That's the thing I'm worried about. They have done
that's the issue with the going back to the NL. That's the issue with the Pirates. Their ownership has blatantly said they make moves for profit. That the Pirates team is one of the more profitable teams in baseball, believe it or not. They just haven't had the success, but they don't spend. Even though they have young studs pitching, they won't spend on bats. They won't spend on anything because they want to maintain profits.
Same thing with Tampa. Again, for every team that doesn't spend, especially in baseball and football, of course, football has a cap, even though there's not a floor. I think that's the one thing that you're going to see in football eventually. But, the bad teams in baseball still make a ton of money because the contracts, because the revenue sharing, all that. In fact, that's where, everybody's like, oh, we need a salary cap. And one of the things like teams like the Yankees and Red Sox say, okay, well, if we're going to have a salary cap, then you need to have a salary floor because you can't allow the teams that don't spend to take revenue and to get that and to profit when they're not trying. And baseball is, and I guess maybe that basketball is becoming this too. And this is why it's frustrating. Baseball, and I've told you this many times, what makes the sport work isn't just the champions. It's the good teams that don't make the playoffs, but they're still fun to watch. I will always reference the Rangers from in the late 80s to early 90s. They would either win 9-8 or they'd lose 9-8. They would usually score all their runs in the eighth inning, or all their runs would be scored in the eighth inning against them, and they would win. They'd finish 10 games above 500, but they would be, 15 games out of first because the Oakland Athletics were so damn good and things like that. And in reality, the Rangers probably should have tore down, but they didn't. They kept trying to win like that. And so they were always competitive. They were always fun, but they didn't make the playoffs. Those are the type of teams that make a sport work. It's the middle that makes the sport fun. You and I referenced the 80s NBA and the 90s. The 90s, it was the Cavaliers. The 80s, it was the Milwaukee Bucks, who was really, really good, but they just, you couldn't get past Chicago, Detroit, and Boston. But they were a fun team. Cleveland, in the early 90s, the exact same way. And baseball, it's either you're winning, you're going for a title, or you're purposely trying to tank. And that's where the frustration is.
Man, it's so funny when you think of teams like the 80s Bucks. A lot of people don't think about them or forget about how great that team was in the 80s because they never made it to the championship.
Yep.
They never made it to the NBA Finals. It reminds me of, like in the NFL, the 70s Rams.
They were 2000s Chargers.
The 2000 Chargers. But with the Rams, they at least made the Super Bowl, but it was their worst version of their team. It was just a down year in the NFC, but a 9-7 NFC West champion LA Rams made it to the Super Bowl just because it was a down year. But yeah, poor Chargers in the 2000s. They had so many great. Hey, speaking of, we're gonna be doing a show about the 2004 season, and that's kind of the start of the emergence of the 2000s Chargers, led by Drew Brees and Antonio Gates and Marty Schottenheimer. Rest in peace. So.
Yeah, we got Shotty Ball in Dallas, baby. Shotty Ball.
Okay, let's segue back to baseball.
Let's now talk about the Yankees, because the Yankees, Garrett Cole, he's out for the year. That just feels like, the tire was already a little low because they didn't sign Juan Soto, and this was one of the first times that we at least saw that they actually got outbid. They allowed it, but they got outbid. They got outbid by the crosstown rival. And the Yankees are, again, they're one of those teams I can easily see them, Aaron Judge having 60 home runs, 130 RBIs, and they're right there. But I kind of feel like this is going to be a year where the Yankees take a huge step back.
Maybe. So
you have the wild card, as you can see on the list. I want to get rid of it.
Here's my thing. I think they're going to switch more to a defensive-oriented team, only because they added Max Fried from the Braves.
I'm sorry. Did you see that defensive collapse in the World Series?
They added Cody Bellinger.
Really good player.
He's basically the Juan Soto replacement. Not the offensive power, but he is a great defensive outfielder, and I
Yeah.
think that will go a long way. Now, here's the big wild card: Paul Goldschmidt. Can he return back to his MVP form for at least 1 year? And to me, that will dictate how the rest of the season for the Yankees is going to go. I think everything else might. I think without that, they're still a 90-win team. But if Goldschmidt at first base provides any kind of resemblance to his MVP form, I think the New York Yankees in 2025 are going to be a problem for everybody.
I agree. I 100% agree. I just don't know if that'll happen. Goldschmidt's one of those guys that he's going to make the Hall of Fame, but people don't really know him because of where he played, and especially early on in his career playing for Arizona and playing for some really bad Arizona teams.
Oh, I apologize. I have to say one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I love that they got Devin Williams from
Yes.
the Brewers. He's a great relief pitcher. And again, this is going back to what I was saying. I think the Yankees are going to shift more from an offensive power to more of like the 96 Yankees where they're more team defensive oriented.
Does that work now, though? I mean,
We'll
we're
see.
in the era of strikeouts and home runs.
Their offseason basically said that that's the strategy they're going to go, and let's see if it even works. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. And then again, we talked about Toronto. Tampa's still a team that could easily win 83, 84 games. I mean, it's Tampa. Tampa's going to do Tampa things. Their roster's not going to blow your mind, but their metrics when their pitching is going to be really solid. They're either going to have a good year because they're going to win a bunch of one-run games, or they're going to struggle because they're going to lose a bunch of one-run games. And that's literally what happened last year. They just could not win those close games that they had won in 2023 that got them into the playoffs. And man, you think all 5 of the Tampa Devil Ray fans hate the Rangers? Because whenever Tampa makes the playoffs, the Rangers just tend to be there and just tend to beat them.
Oh man, they probably do, and I
fun.
love the fact that you call them Devil Rays.
There'll always be the Devil Rays to me. It is fun to know that as a Ranger fan, and yes, we have the World Series. And to be fair, since 2012, since 2010, so the last 15 years, the Rangers have legitimate playoff success. We're talking 3 World Series and 7 playoff appearances. But it's nice to know that there's at least one team in Tampa that rues the day when we play them in the playoffs. We get them. Oh, and also Houston, because how many playoff series wins has Houston over Texas? 0. Just saying. All right, let's go to the AL Central. This is like the NL Central, but different. There's a lot of quality in the Central and the AL. But there's a reason why so many teams made the playoffs last year from the Central, and that's because Chicago was so bad that the other teams picked up a lot of wins on them.
Man, you hit the nail on the head there, sir. And I think that's going to be the same case in 2025. The only thing I could say would be different is I think maybe Minnesota with a healthy, Carlos Correa, Buxton, and Pablo Lewis. No, not Pablo Lewis. Sorry, Royce Lewis, the third baseman Royce Lewis, center fielder Byron Buxton, and then of course Carlos Reyes, shortstop. If they're all healthy, I think they'll be fine because they have 2 really good starters in Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan. This is another division where I see 3 or 4 teams that could legitimately win the Central. Cleveland, they won it last season. Kansas City, they got who's now going to be the best player in baseball, Bobby Witt Jr. Detroit Tigers with their starting pitching is ridiculous. Cleveland Guardians relief pitching is ridiculous. And then the Twins, they have a lot of great starters, not much depth, but it's a 4-team race in that one division. It really could be anybody. You could have picked anybody else, and I would have said outside of Chicago, of course, and I would have agreed with you.
Yeah.
But
I do think Chicago is going to be better this year. I think that, but again, better by what? 60 wins? I mean, they're not going to win over 65 games, but I do think
if they win 65 games, that's a 24-game improvement. That would be amazing. You should, whoever I don't even know the manager of the Chicago White Sox. That's how bad they were last season. I'm just gonna look at it right now because I really don't know, and because they won 41 games, it's an all-time record for the lowest amount of wins in a season for a baseball team.
They completely tanked, like openly, didn't even hide it. We are terrible, blah, blah, blah.
It's just crazy how bad they were, and hey, good for them. They're gonna start building, and I think they have legitimate opportunities to get really good. They have a really good player in Luis Robert Jr. at center field, who definitely won't end the season with them. But I think by 2027, 2028, I think the White Sox might actually be contenders.
I still would love to know what happened to the team that was supposed to be the next dynasty that collapsed.
That was Tony La Russa in 2022. They finished 500, and I think that was it. Will Venable is the manager.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Former. But yeah, Tony La Russa, as great as he was, great manager. Won a World Series with the Athletics, won a World Series with the Cardinals, all that. That last year, I don't know what. Well, I'm not gonna say I don't know what the management was thinking. I get it. It's Tony La Russa, but man, that was like the worst hire. Falling asleep in the dugout, literally calling out his own players for stuff, because he's old school and all that. But yeah, but anyway, so my point is, though, is that the White Sox will at least be more competitive. So you're not going to have all these teams having, just 20 wins against them. I don't feel comfortable. You and I both ended up independently going with Detroit. I don't feel comfortable in that. I think Minnesota still could be a contender, but they could also finish 10 games under 500. I think Cleveland can still be a contender. They could also finish 10 games under 500. And the same thing with Kansas City as well.
Yeah. I think the reason why I picked Detroit was because of that rookie phenom Jackson Jobe coming in, and I think he's going to start. He'll be one of the top 5 starters for their pitching staff. They had the Cy Young winner, Skubal. They got another good pitcher, Flattery, and they got Jackson Jobe coming up. I just feel like that will be the difference in this division for this season. Cleveland, they just had a magical run in 2024. They made it to the ALCS. They lost to the Yankees there. I think they have one of an all-time great relief pitching. Them and the Tigers had the best relief pitching in the AL, but the Guardians had a ERA almost 1 run per game better than the Tigers. That's how big the gap between 1 and 2 was. That's how good the Guardians relief pitching was. It was comical because in 2024, if the Guardians had the lead on you after 6 innings,
it was over.
It was over. They won the game. Kansas City, another team that could win this division. Bobby Witt Jr., if it wasn't for Aaron Judge, he was the MVP last season. And I think he's going to be even better this season. My question is, they have a really good rotation. Seth Lugo, Waka, Lorenzen, really good starters. They have a 34-year-old future, possibly Hall of Famer in Salvador Perez. How much longer can he stay at catcher before you have to switch him to another position?
And I don't know. I don't even know if you do that because, his value is catcher.
Kind of like Joe Mauer with the Twins back in the day.
Oh, but Joe Mauer did transition to first for a couple of years, and I'm not saying that Salvador doesn't hit well, but his strength is catching. And now the great thing is he hasn't missed a lot of time. He's consistently played. I think is he the last one from the World Series?
Yeah, he's the last one. Always been a Royal. He's about to, in a few years, if he stays with Kansas City at catcher, I think he'll tie, Johnny Bench or so. There's some players that have only played catcher for one team in their entire career.
I think it's like 370 games away or something like that.
Something like that.
He's going to end up when he retires as maybe it's George Brett and Salvador Perez when you think of the Royals Mount Rushmore 1 and 2.
Which is crazy because no one really thinks of Salvador Perez in that mode because they had such a gap between really good teams. But this guy's been consistently good. He's been consistently there. Doesn't miss games. To me, I think in 5 years, whenever he retires, I think he will end up being in the Hall of Fame.
I don't think he's a first ballot or anything. I think it'll be a while, but yeah, I think he'll get in. And to go back to the whole division, this feels like a division where we're going to look in the next 5 years, and we're going to have like 4 different division winners. And all these teams are going to be right around each other. And I don't know what that means in the playoffs. Now, I have 2 making it, but the reason why I have 2 making it is I was just being more just like, okay, I'm going to just pick a wild card team from each division because it kind of feels like it's one of those years like that. As good as the AL East is, and Mario Scott said it's the best division in all of sports, I don't necessarily disagree, but it's really hard for that type of division to have back-to-back years that they had like last year. I mean, the AL East was just freaking phenomenal last year.
And this is not college football or college sports where there's a voting system for rankings. This is based off of record only.
Yeah, a good point.
If these teams are not gonna, I mean, they're just gonna beat each other up. That's what's gonna happen in the East. They're just gonna beat each other up. There's gonna be 3 really good teams, 1 mediocre, or 2 and 3 really good teams and 2 mediocre. And that third team that's really good is probably not gonna make the playoffs, or maybe they will. I mean, I have the Orioles, Yankees, and Red Sox making, and I have the Tigers and Royals. I really think. Like, this is where you and I disagree when we talk about the West. I don't think there'll be a wild card in the West just because of the changes that are going on in that division.
All right, let's go to the West as we'll finish up the American League. You and I both have the Rangers. I just had to go different logos. I like to be different. I think this is, again, there are 3 teams that the Rangers, the Mariners, and the Astros, all 3 won't shock me if one of them wins the division. It also won't shock me if the other 2 make the wild card or don't make the wild card. The AL West is very much a 3-team division. You're a little bit more positive about the A's. I kind of feel like the A's might be this year's Chicago, and end up winning like 45 games, because I think the thing that people aren't talking about is they're going to wake up every day going, we're playing in a minor league park. We're in Sacramento. That's going to weigh on them.
That might, but the Sacramento A's for the next 3 seasons.
I know, just the A's. Remember, they're just the Athletics for the next 3 years.
Oh, I thought they were going to be called the Sacramento A's. Okay,
if I'm not mistaken, I think they're just going with the A's.
Oh, that's even funnier. I love it. I think with the young talent they have, Oakland, the A's are going to be strongly encouraged to build a winner by the time 2028 comes and they're moving into Vegas. They've already done it by securing Rooker. They won 69 games last season, which was amazing to me, considering the fact that they were so terrible in 2023. I like their prospect to at least get to about 75 wins in 2025. I really think this is a team that's done enough. They got Jose Leclerc in the offseason.
We'll miss him as a Ranger. I know he was up and down, but he was the last guy from the old playoff regime. And a part of all this is I was just watching a bunch of the Ranger playoff runs. You forget how many of the playoff games Leclerc closed out.
Yeah, and he looked nervous in some of them, which understandably so, but he was able to get the job done, which would help for his future success in baseball, I feel. Just like with the Mariners, the Athletics have a really good power-hitting catcher, and Shea Langeliers. I probably butchered that last name. They have a good right fielder in Lawrence Butler, and of course, like I mentioned, their DH Brent Rooker, excuse me. They're building a team, and I think this is a team that can vulture some wins from Houston and Texas and Seattle, and they're just probably going to sweep the Angels, but they're going to make it pretty interesting in the AL West. I think I don't think the division winner wins only 88 games like it happened last season, but uh, I really feel that the competition there's an added competition now to the AL West. There's a fourth team to consider. They'll get from 69 wins. I really think they'll hit
Wait,
75.
wait. Whoa. Are you really saying you think the Athletics are in contention for the division?
I'm telling you, they're in contention to get to 75 wins.
Dude, I think if they get 75 wins, you
They
and I
got 69 wins last season.
in Oakland, they're in Sacramento now. They are going as crappy as Oakland's facilities were, and as crappy as penny pinching as they are. They're now penny pinching in a minor league park in a minor league town. And that's no disrespect against Sacramento, but I'm talking about how the major that team. I have no doubt that they might start out hot, but that team in June is going to be like, oh great, we've got 10 of the next 15 games in Sacramento. Yay. I think that they go the Chicago White Sox route and completely implode. Or not even implode. I mean, I just don't think I just think that team's got no motivation to be great for the next couple of years because they're in Sacramento.
Look, it'll be the same amount of fans that show up to that minor league
Good point on that
ballpark
one.
as they did in Oakland. Let's just be real here.
No, you're right about that. I mean, it's not like they're leaving, but I don't know, man. I agree with you that they're going to try to build it, and that's kind of partly why I kind of think they might do the White Sox route, dude. If you're the A's, you don't need to be good now. You want to be good going into, or at least have promise going into Las Vegas in 3 years. So to me, they just tank the next couple years. Do the Houston Astros, get some first round picks, high first round picks, and you go from there.
I would be shocked if they did that just because they paid Brent Rooker so much money in the offseason.
Yeah, but they paid him with the understanding of, it ain't this year and it ain't next year. Kind of like how what Texas did when they did Seager and Simeon that first year. They both of them said, look, yeah, we have no illusions that we're going to win the first year. We understand that they're paying us big now, and then they're going to pay big down the road for other players. And, and then year 2 is when they won the World Series. I think with Rooker, that was the same thing with him, was like, hey, we're over, because they did overpay. We're overpaying for you because you're going to be shit for 3 years, but hey, in 2028, we're going to be rocking and rolling.
I can see your point. I can see that happening, and I definitely could see my point where they're going to get to 75. I can see your point
too, because they're a scrappy roster. They're not quite Tampa Bay scrappy, but this is a scrappy roster, and they showed that last year. But to be fair, I was looking at it. They started hot. They were really bad for the majority of the season, and then they finished hot. So, I mean, it's one of those that, your record can sometimes mislead just because if you just have 2 really good stretches, you can, and the same thing with you can have a really good team if you have 2 really bad stretches. But anyway, let's go to the 3 that Angels. You suck. Sorry, dudes. I don't know what to say. I feel bad for Angel fans because their owner has tried. Money has never been the issue, but it's never worked. Like they've never reached the levels that they did back when they won the World Series. They've just never have. And for whatever reason, I don't know, but they're in a weird spot. I don't know how they're not trading Mike Trout this year. Like, I get it. You want a franchise player. I feel like it's also 2 years too late. If they'd have traded him 2 years ago, this team could be in a full rebuild mode, starting to come out of it. But now they're just stuck in that middle.
Yeah, now he's 33 years old, so they need him to actually perform well this season to increase his value. And you just never know. He's still one of the best players in baseball. But like you always say, the greatest ability is availability.
Availability, yep.
And he just hasn't been available.
All right, so let's talk about the 3 that, I have 2 of them making the playoffs. You only have 1, but the Rangers, the Astros, the Mariners. Again, the Rangers, if they stay healthy, I can see them winning 95 games. I can see, that pitching staff being dominant, the offense being solid. But if they start having injuries again, I can see last year being a repeat where they're a good team, but they just can't ever consistently get going because they're always having to, figure out injuries. The Astros, I feel like, are on the last legs of a great dynasty. It's been a great run for them. They're still going to be competitive, but losing Bregman and just I don't really understand the Altuve out to left field. That makes no sense to me because you're doing that whole thing where instead of enhancing one position, you're weakening two positions. I just because Altuve's not going to be a great left fielder. And you're not going to, there's nobody at second that you're going, okay, that guy is so good. We've got to move Altuve. If you're going to move Altuve, just move him to DH.
Well, that's Yordan Alvarez, and he's the centerpiece for this franchise for the next 5-10 years. So they're not going to do that. I guess they like Mauricio Dubon at second base.
He's a good player. He's a good player. I don't know. This feels like 2 years too early for this kind of thing.
I think the one thing that might help them this year and get them somewhat competitive is they developed another good pitcher named Hunter Brown. I think he'll be good. I'm not sure if they have enough to be a wild card or division winner this season, but they've in the last 10 years they've been really good, and I'm not going to discount them, but I got to pick a division winner, and I know it's inherently biased since I am a Ranger fan, but I'm going to pick the Rangers. I like what they did in the offseason. I don't like that Gray is hurt, a fractured wrist. That sucks. It would have been good to have Mad Max Scherzer here, but it is what it is. But a healthy Jacob deGrom can fix all.
Well, and again, that's going to be the issue, and that was always the issue. And he looked good when he came back for the few games at the end of the last year, and he's looked good in camp. John Gray getting hurt sucks, but Kumar Rocker, Howell, he's kind of struggled, but Jack Leiter's looked really good at times.
And what? With losing Kirby Yates to the Dodgers, and they lost another guy too. Hold on 1 second. Dave Robinson and Leclerc. I almost feel like Leiter might be better off to start the season as a relief pitcher.
He is. I mean, he might have to spot start because Gray, but here's my big prediction. And a lot of people thought John Gray might be the guy. I think by the time the All-Star break hits, Jack Leiter is the closer and doing great for Texas.
I wouldn't mind that at all for this season. I mean, obviously you want him to be a full-time starter.
I'm fine either way. Dude, look,
I know baseball has changed now to where it's more about relief pitching than starting pitching, but he's Al Leiter's kid. Like you expect him to be a starter.
I'm just saying though. But if he has the stuff and he can come out and he can, 65 appearances and 55 saves, I'm perfectly fine with that. I think the season for the Rangers, again, it rests on DeGrom, but it also rests on Nathan Eovaldi, who it feels like he's 5 games away in a season from making a case for a Cy Young. Eovaldi can be so wonderful, but like 2 games a month, he just gives up like 7 runs. So that's baseball. But it feels like with DeGrom, if DeGrom is there and Eovaldi can kind of be the number 2 guy, then he'll get the number 2 guy in the rotation against him. I think he's better. For the offense, you've got to have Garcia come back. He's got to bounce back. He was not terrible last year, but he struggled. Marcus Semien struggled. Again, just like with the pitching, injuries. Does Evan Carter come back? Is that back finally good? Josh Young, is his wrist finally good? If those 2 are healthy, and also Evan Carter has to learn to hit off left-handing. He's terrible against left-handing, but you've got other bat options where you can still kind of platoon him as he works his way against left-handers. But Jock Peterson, I love Nathaniel Lowe. He will go down as one of my favorite Rangers because he was just a consummate professional. He was way better than what people thought. Even now that he's left, I was just watching John Boy Media, and he was on there, and he's left the Rangers, but he was spouting the Ranger ring, and he was showing it off. He loved being a Ranger, and I wish he could have been a Ranger for life, but that's baseball.
Jock Peterson at 32 had his best season last year. Now, that could be a flash in the pan, but this dude's always been solid. And I think he adds a little bit more stability, lose a little bit defensively because Nathan Lowe's a Gold Glove defender. But I think Jock Peterson's more consistent at the plate, which will help the Rangers have more of those consistent innings where they're just not relying on the home run.
And with having Jake Berger at first base, I really, or third base, first, I think he played both. You can alternate.
As long as Young is healthy, Berger will be first.
Okay, so I think having Jock maybe at DH more often might help with the defensive decline. And I don't think Jake Berger's the worst. So just having them, like, he did really well in Miami. He did well with Chicago during that time where we thought Chicago was going to be a team that was going to make some noise. I feel that that's the better move for now. They could always alternate, but
I think Peterson's probably going to DH now. I didn't mean Peterson was replacing Lowe as first, but Peterson's kind of he's the guy that they literally said, hey, we're bringing him on because we want to be a little bit more consistent. Nathan Lowe's issue was he just goes really long stretches where he can't hit the ball.
Kind of like Nomar Vizquel back in the day, but he could still play defense really well.
Yeah, but Lowe was a lot more power. Lowe does hit the long ball.
Yeah.
That's a good comparison. But he was so good at first base. And it's really weird. The Rangers, the Justin Smoke era, they had Rafael Palmeiro. They had like a glut at first base. What's his name? Mark Teixeira. They had a glut at first base. And then ever since then, they've kind of just had worker bees at first base, like Mitch Moreland, Nathaniel Lowe. Those are the two guys that were there when they were making the playoffs, and both of them were solid players. Hell, Moreland got a ring with the Red Sox, but neither one of them was the typical first baseman. I think with Berger moving over to first, because that's where he's going to be as long as Young is healthy. And then you got Jock, who's going to work outfield and some first base. And I think, as you said, they're going to I think the Rangers still Bochy's still kind of old school. He doesn't want to be like, that's my only DH. He likes to have that rotation of DH, depending on matchup, depending on who needs to rest and all that kind of fun stuff.
Bochy turns 70 next month.
Doesn't it feel like he's older, though?
It does feel like he's older because I remember watching him when I was in high school, coaching the Padres back in the day.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. Like when he retired the first time, I thought, I understand why he's retiring, but he was like 67 when he retired.
Yeah.
But I still feel like I still could see him if they win a World Series. I could see him handing it off. I can't think of the guy's name.
While you're thinking, I was going to say with the Mariners, I really think all five of their starting pitchers could probably be in contention for the Cy Young Award. But they need Julio Rodriguez to get back to where he was, and they need Randy Arozarena to be where he was with the Rays back in the day.
Yep.
And they have to get another 30 home run season from Cal Raleigh, their all-star or their all AL catcher. They need that kind of production from their offense because they're not going to get it anywhere else on that lineup. They're basically pitching dependent.
The Marlins, I get it. You play in a pitcher's park, but my God, what I don't know, man. Like it's so weird how well they've developed the pitching side, but how bad the baseball side is, or the offensive side is. And they've also become the king of last day of the season. My gosh, like how many times I mean, I actually feel bad for the Mariner fan base at this point. Like they just can't get over that hump. Like again, you go to the Rangers. The Rangers went into the last week of the season in 2023. They could either make the playoffs, miss the playoffs, or win the division. They almost completely. How about at that choke job? Boy, you want to talk about something that would have made 2011 seem like, sweetness. But the Rangers were able to win 1 out of the 3 against the Mariners. And then last year, I mean, the Mariners they're almost there. Now, in saying that, I can see a season happening where the Blue Jays tank. Like it doesn't work. And then all of a sudden, Bichette and Guerrero Jr. are
and on the trade block because you're going to lose them as free agents either way. So the Blue Jays, hell, we even said it when we said these. The Blue Jays could win. Hell, they might even win the World Series, and they could still lose those guys because we don't know if the Blue Jays are going to pay them. But if the Mariners pick up someone like that, all of a sudden that pitching staff and that bullpen and that Mariner team becomes really, really scary. I could see them doing a Rangers where they get in as the wild card, but they end up making the World Series.
Hey, it's just like in the NFL, the Cincinnati Bengals, except the opposite. The Mariners have all the defense in the world. They just don't have any offense.
Yep.
You make them a middle of the road offense by adding a Bichette or a Guerrero Jr., then yeah, you can put a ring on them. That team is lethal.
All right. So here we go. We're going to finish up the show with our World Series. And Noe goes with Dodgers versus Detroit. You have the Dodgers winning in 6 games. I say Rangers versus Atlanta. I have the Rangers winning in 7 games. I feel like the Rangers are going to repeat, even though it's only every other year, they're going to repeat the Twins when the Twins won in 87 and then 91. And both of them, they were like, what? They just won? How the hell did that happen? I kind of feel like the Rangers are going to not surprise, because actually when doing research, I was actually impressed with how many people have the Rangers bouncing back this year.
It's called the Bochy bounce back.
Well, and also the Rangers, again, we look at Seager and Simeon and their age, but the Rangers have also done a really good job over the last 4 years of getting young talent and cultivating it. And, this team, you've got, and of course, Simeon and Seager both have 4 or 5 years left if they want to play, but you've got a lot of depth underneath that, as long as Rocker and Leiter make that next step pitching wise, as long as Josh Young and Evan Carter stay healthy. That's the big thing for them. Can Garcia bounce back and become the guy that he was in 2023? And again, it wasn't like he was terrible last year, but he did have a down year. But you have the Detroit Tigers versus the LA Dodgers. That'd be an interesting World Series.
Yeah, it'll be. I mean, I think this is more like a plucky underdog making it to the World Series. I think they'll have a nice Cinderella story. But again, just like with the Mariners, they have such a great pitching staff that it's hard for me to discount them. And on top of that, they have a pretty solid relief pitching staff. So starting pitching is great. Relief pitching is great. I think they'll just have enough offense to just get through some of these, like the wild card round, the divisional round, and the ALCS. But they're going to run into a juggernaut in the Dodgers, who top to bottom no one can match. And I think the Dodgers will repeat. I think they figured out how to finally break through.
Yeah, just sign everybody.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Sign everybody. I said this at the beginning of the show. It's a little bit of a tease, but I think it's valid. I think the one team in the NL that could go toe-to-toe with them in a 7-game series is Atlanta, as long as Atlanta's healthy. Again, that's the big thing with the Braves. I think they will. I think you and I were talking about this, and I know, because we have a lot of our listeners are Astro fans because of the page we're on. And I know a lot of them will be like, oh, you are just being homers. But I legitimately feel like as long as they stay healthy, I think the Rangers win. And I think the Rangers might win comfortably in the AL West. I think the Rangers might finally break off and go over 98 wins. That's one of the weird things, is that the Rangers, even when they've won the division, they've never had a 100-win season. I think as long as they stay healthy, they could touch that this year. I like them, again, until Bruce Bochy loses in a World Series. I like what he does with the bullpen. He knows how to get the best out of an average bullpen in the playoffs. Again, we talked about Jose Leclerc, who had struggled. I always forget that Chapman's on that World Series team, and he had some scary moments, but he also had some shutdown moments. Bochy just knows how to pull those strings. So I think the Rangers win in a classic 7-game, and we see them win their second World Series. But if your World Series happens, I wouldn't hate that either. I've always had a soft spot for Detroit. I think because of 84, I was 9 years old and they just have this magical year where nobody can beat them. Like they started out like 31-5, like they just couldn't be beat. And so I've always kind of liked Detroit. I also like their old stadium too.
I love their old stadium, and it was 440 down center field. They had the pillars. It was beautiful. I like. They'll never make stadiums like that again, but it was very beautiful. Yeah, but the '84 Tigers, you could consider them one of the. Me and Wham have to do a show like this where we consider like the greatest single season team ever. '84 Tigers, I'd put them up there.
Oh heck yeah! Oh heck yeah! And it wasn't like they were bad around those years, but '84, everything hit. Lou Whitaker.
87 would have been it too. It had those crappy Twins come in and just beat them in 5 games.
That was, dude. I love the Minnesota Twins of '87 and '91 are so fascinating because they won both years, but it wasn't like the same team. Like in '87, it was Jack Morris and Dan Gladden and people like that. Of course, Kirby Puckett was a threat on both of those teams. But then in '91, it was Chuck Knobloch and Scott Erickson and just these young guys, and they got so hot. And then you had the Braves, who were a lot closer to being the Buffalo Bills of baseball than people realize. They were able to pull out a couple World Series, so it made it okay. But I mean, they were so talented, but they would get to the World Series and just struggle.
Yeah, and you think with the Braves, they were built on really good young pitching. You would think they would not have any issues, but yeah, it just didn't pan together for them in the World Series. Luckily, they broke through in the strike-shortened season in '95, but it's hard for me to understand. I would have to go back and review the '90 Braves to understand really why they just couldn't win more than one World Series that decade.
The best way to describe it is just like the Braves. Just like losing to the Twins. It wasn't like they were bad in those. They just got beat. The other team just did a little bit more. We all remember one of the most famous plays in the Braves Twins is the fake where Lonnie Smith on a ball to the gap should have easily been at third, and Minnesota does this brilliant making him think the ball's coming to him, and so he stops at second. And then the very next play, a single that would have scored him, he couldn't score, and they end up losing that game by a run. It was just weird things like that, and that's why even for all the talk about how you build a roster in any sport, at the end of the day, you still got to go out there and play it, and you still got to make those plays, and it's one or two plays that decide a lot of times all those series. And it's one of those. Also, I'd have loved to see if Pittsburgh could have broke through in one of those, and you get Bonilla and Andy Van Slyke at Bonds and that pitching staff and what they would have done against, say, Minnesota and stuff. It's just that's the fun part of sports that I think we miss now. You and I talk about this all the time. We're in such a, if you don't win a champion, you're trash. And even if you win a champion, if we don't like it, you're trash. And it's like, dude, you got to enjoy the teams that don't quite make it, because that's the fabric. That's the tapestry of sports right there, are those teams.
I think if Pittsburgh made it in one of those 3 years, they made it to the NLCS 90 to 92. They would have won. It probably would have beat the Twins. I'm not sure if they would beat the Blue Jays or the Athletics, but I think they would have beat the Twins.
Really good. That's a back-to-back team that people forget about, oddly. That team was stacked. In fact, until they won those back-to-back, Toronto had spent 10 years being, why aren't y'all better? Like, why aren't y'all better? And
they were the Braves.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Good point. Except for they weren't getting to the World Series. They were either getting beat in the playoffs or not even making the playoffs with really good teams. All right. One other thing I do want to know, I hate that it's the year after, but I appreciate that All-Star games going back to everybody's wearing their uniforms. I appreciate that baseball realizes that even in this money-making era where they would sell probably, I guarantee you, All-Star jerseys makes them $10 million easy. They realize how it just makes the All-Star game boring.
Yeah, and I love the uniqueness, like wearing the jerseys. I just love the look. I used to love watching the All-Star game. The game also, but also like, home run derby and all that other stuff. But it was just nice to have that break in the season, especially in the summertime. Kids are off. You sit back and watch some great baseball and some good-looking uniforms, which you and I both love. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Speaking of, you will be back in studio, or maybe do it like this, but we will be doing another live watch of the All-Star game. And to be fair, the only reason I watched the All-Star game last year was because we were doing that, and it was in Arlington. I probably would have, tapped into it, but the uniforms were just absolutely atrocious. And it's not even that the designs were bad; they just weren't Texas. There was, that's the whole thing they had been doing over the last few years when they put the teams in all the same uniforms. It was supposed to represent the area, and nothing about those uniforms. You didn't think Texas. I don't know. I'm just glad they're going back to that.
Agreed.
All right.
Oh, got one plug. I'd like to thank Corey with Grandeur Pest Services.
Yes.
Or Solutions, sorry. Grandeur Pest Solutions for saving me from a rat. He doesn't know this because I didn't tell him, but a week or two ago, I found a dead rat in my backyard. And that was due to, great service by Corey, making sure that things were set right to trap and kill the rat. So I got
to admit, it is weird though that he used landmines in your backyard for that. Now, speaking of that, Corey is about to make a career change, but he is signed on with us for advertising for that. So we'll be talking about that here coming soon. It's really cool. I mean, had some preliminary discussions, but he's still doing Grandeur Pest Solutions as of now. So again, check them out, please. But I think, why are you failing me? God, just like Studio Wife. There we go. We will be back in 2 weeks. Now it's going to be interesting because in 2 weeks, it's going to be different. We had a Texas two-seam crossover. In 2 weeks, we're going to have are we going to do that in 2 weeks? Yeah, I guess
Bad Movies and a Drink, yeah.
Bad Movies and a Drink draft day, because the draft will be coming up in a month. We're also going to be doing a really cool on TikTok and Reels. We're going to do a team draft preview starting for only the first round, starting with the last team to have a pick in the first round all the way to the first team in the first pick of the first round. As soon as they trade it to the Cowboys for a 5th round pick, that should only be fair. But we're going to be doing that. In 2 weeks, you and I are getting together to talk about the 2004 NFL season. Our look backs this year are a year in the NFL. 2004 will be the first one. 1985 will be the second one, and then we'll go from there. Anything else you want to say?
That's all, man. This is good. I'm looking forward to the new season, and go Rangers.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited for baseball this year. Last year, I think it was maybe the hangover of the winning. I was like, okay, I'm fine. But I really, really, really want to enjoy the baseball season. Oh, Corey Thompson's in the chat. Hello, Corey. Thank you. No, thank you, brother. Until next time, he's intern Noah, the commissioner of the pro. Oh, real quick. Happy birthday, intern Noah, the pro, the commissioner.
Appreciate it.
Until next time, this is Al Drake, the coverage of the Texas two-seam on L4.